Hello everyone, welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. Today is a first for the channel. It is the board of truth in the great outdoors. Alright, I'm doing a lot of squinting, I can't see. Glasses aren't helping. It's one of those weird light days. It's sunny and blue, but we've got clouds. Kills the eyes. You know, unintended consequences. That's what this video is about. Alright, so, shit hitting the fan, prepared mind, unintended consequences. What am I talking about? I'm talking about oil. Oil. Oil isn't just a lubricant, it's not just black goo. It's energy. It's concentrated energy. And it's really amazing what oil is. If you think about your vehicle, and you put 1 gallon of liquid in your vehicle, right? And your vehicle will travel 20, 30, 40 miles. I mean, that's a long ways. And a vehicle is not a small thing. You know, as a kid, I grew up push-starting cars because ran out of gas or battery died or whatever. And it took a lot of energy just to push a car a couple hundred feet. You know, we're talking 40 miles on a gallon of gas. That's how much energy is stored, right, in 1 gallon. Like this beer here, that's enough energy to keep me going until I go get another beer. But oil is something really impressive. So there's a lot of energy in 1 gallon of gas. There's a lot of energy in a barrel of oil. So when you think about what kind of work 1 gallon of gas can do for you, it's easy to see why, when we first started this game 100 years ago, 1 barrel of oil would get you 100 barrels. That's a John's artistry depiction of a semi, you know, carrying 100 barrels. You know, so it took a lot of energy, because we just talked about how much energy is in a single gallon of gas, and a barrel holds X number of gallons. I think it's 45. Depends on the barrel. So that barrel holds a lot, right? But then there's a lot of energy in it. But that 1 barrel, even though that's an immense amount of energy, it would yield 100. Today it's a bit different. 1 barrel of energy will yield 5 barrels of oil. You know, 1 barrel of oil, 5 barrels of oil. The ratio, it's come down tremendously. It's down to 1/20th the yield. So we're still producing the same amount of energy with that 1 barrel. It's just getting a lot less. What does that tell us about the value of that oil? Well, the value needs to be a lot higher. So even if you took oil prices 100 years ago, let's just assign it 1/4 for a gallon. Times that by 20, you know, you're about where we're at today. So it kind of makes sense, right? The value of a gallon of gasoline out of a barrel. But we're having to go to more places to get it. Having to go up to the fucking tundra, up to the Arctic Circle in Alaska. Why? Well, because Saudi Arabia is running out. They're running out of oil. Why are we having to get shale oil? Well, because we're running out of oil in Saudi Arabia. The places where the cheap, easy to get oil is at, you know, they're running out, literally. Venezuela's got the largest reserves on the planet, except it's really expensive to get because it's deep, it's not the right viscosity, it's not sweet crude, it's heavy crude. So this cost, because we've continued to rely on oil to a greater and greater extent, and because the U.S. is no longer the biggest consumer of oil. Now China is. It's not like we got smaller, it's just they got bigger at the same time, right? There's unintended consequences for this game that we've started. And the game I'm talking about is the use of cheap energy. Now, I was talking to a co-worker last week about a horse. A horse used to be a unit of work, much like your car. A horse could pull a plow, it could pull a wagon, but it took an awful lot of energy because we didn't have tractors back when they used horses. Let's say 100 years ago, the tractor was not all that common. There was a lot of work. You had to plant the hay, swath the hay, store the hay, bale the hay, and horses go through an awful lot of hay, and you don't get a whole lot for it, right? So the energy ratio on a horse is kind of like it is with a car today. A car, you put in 1 gallon and you get a lot of work out of it. A horse, you put in a little bit and you barely get any more. Horses were very expensive. So we've developed this system where we use energy wholesale. We use a lot of oil. And as a result, our standard of living has gone up tremendously because of the efficiency and the amount of energy that's in it. So what we've got now is we've got a lower return, which means our price is going to go up. It has to go up even more. Right now, there's about 70, if I remember the numbers right, $70 billion in debt that the shale oil industry has developed. That is, they've taken money from investors and they need to pay it back plus interest, right? It's corporate debt in the oil industry. And the reason that debt is so high is because the price of oil has been so low. You know, it was down here around 40 just a couple of years ago. And they can't produce that shale oil that inexpensively. They're not making money. In fact, they're losing money. They're going into more debt. Now, when we look at $70 billion, personally, you know, I don't think I could pay that back. But $70 billion, that used to be our national debt. Right? $70 billion, right, that used to be what it would take to run the government. You know, run the government for several months. Now $70 billion, that's just a couple of days for the federal government. But $70 billion, is that enough to bring down the economy? No, I don't think so, but I do think that if they went belly up with shale oil, one, it would take away this production ratio. 1 unit of energy to get 5 units of energy. That would disappear from our economy. But the cost, it's the expense, it's what the oil is and does. It's not just that debt that would hurt us, but the loss of that amount of oil. You know, if they're producing $70 billion worth of oil a year in the shale oil industry, to lose that would be to lose not $70 billion, but $350 billion because of that 1-to-5 ratio. There's unintended consequences in that we've built this giant industrial machine. And we've got a kid riding a motorcycle. We built this really big industrial machine. It's called the economy. And it requires this cheap oil for us to live at our standard of living. Right? So, the unintended consequence is we're going to get shit hitting the fan because of oil. If for no other reason, oil itself is going to cause us trouble. Let's get into this a little further. Right? On the market just a couple of years ago, oil was $40 a barrel. Right? In order for shale oil to come close to even, it needs to be about $75. And at $100, all the oil that's gotten or sought after is profitable. Okay, right now we're sitting at $72. Right? It won't take much to get shale to where it can break even and be profitable, save that sector from collapsing. But at the same time, it needs to be up at 100 to make ANWR, which is the Alaskan oil, way up in the Arctic Circle, profitable. Right? Just today, because of what's going on with these losses, these are known, right? Oil has to go up. The volume is coming down. It's harder to get. It's more expensive. And not only that, we've got trouble in Iran. Right? What does trouble in Iran mean? We could have political unrest. We could have terrorism. We could have sabotage. Uncertainty in the oil market. That Iranian oil is energy, and it goes to Europe. It goes all over the world. It is our standard of living, and to have it interrupted is going to create supply issues. It's going to create scarcity. It's going to cause people to focus on oil and realize what is going on. And as they realize what's going on, you're going to see increases in the cost of a barrel. Today alone, it went up 2%. That doesn't mean it won't go back down 2%, or it could fall 5% in a day. That's speculators. There's people buying and selling and shorting and going long and all the same bullshit they do with everything else in the market. Except oil is a real commodity. It is not a Bitcoin that has no real value. Right? You can actually do something with a barrel of fucking oil. I can't do a whole lot with Bitcoin except trade it for fiat dollars and then go buy oil. But what we're looking at is an increase, whether we like it or not. Because oil, in order to pay companies to go get it, so they can pay back their debt, it has to be profitable. Everything has to be profitable. And it's getting more expensive, it's getting harder to find, and it's less efficient. Anyways, we've got some unintended consequences, and you and me were going to pay for it. Back when there was lots of oil and it was super cheap, right, and companies could get it out of the ground easily and it became more profitable. 1 to 100, it's way more profitable than it's 1 to 5. Way more profitable. So how does this, I'm talking about shit hitting the fan. How does this weigh into that, shit hitting the fan? How does it work into our concerns? Well, it works into our concerns because when we talk about energy, we talk about our income. Our income is fixed, right? Say you make $100,000 a year. 30% of that right off the top goes to taxes. Right? After that, you've got fixed expenses. And by fixed, I mean car payments, house payment, food, energy, electricity. All of these are fixed. You can't just live without them. So those are also, they demand a huge portion of your overall income. It leaves you with a very small amount of disposable income. So we talk about an increase in the cost of oil, right? On the barrel, we're going to end up with an increased cost of gasoline. Right now we're at about, say, $3 national. If that went up to $4, that's a 33% increase. That's a huge increase. Now you go, that's just a gallon of gas. That's a 33% increase. Don't just look at the 1 gallon of gas you're getting, but look at the millions and billions of gallons that are sold. And that increase of 33% turns into an enormous sum. How about $3 to $6? $6 gas? You bet. That's definitely possible. We get up to $100 a barrel. It could go up to $6. Right? That's a 100% increase in the cost of fuel. Right? How about $3 to a $9 a gallon? That's a 300% increase in fuel costs. That is very possible to go to $9 a gallon fuel. There's a number of things that can cause that. A number of things. We could end up with war in the Middle East. We could end up seeing a nation like Saudi Arabia say, we can't produce the oil anymore. Our wells have gone dry. We can only produce 75% of what we normally do, or 50%. It doesn't matter what the number is. Any drop in volume of production is going to cause an increase in the cost, because the demand, the increased demand coming from China and other third world developing nations is going up. We're seeing production leveling out. We've seen peak oil, which means we're never going to produce that much oil again. Right? It's getting harder and harder, more and more expensive, and there's going to be more and more demand. There's going to be more and more competition for what oil is available. So we could see 300% increase in our fuel cost. Right? That's going to chew into this disposable income, which is already very small. And by very small, I mean Americans don't have money. They don't have cash. On top of everything else, we got some thunder coming. This is just amazing. Anyways, disposable income is small. They took a survey a couple of months ago and said, what would happen if you had a $100 bill come up, a surprise payment or something, expense? People said, oh, we can handle that. They got up to about $500, and half the people couldn't afford. In other words, they don't have $500 in savings. They don't have the disposable income because they spend it every month, catching up on bills, paying off debt. They just don't have the money. And people, Americans, no longer save. They no longer save. So if we see a 300% increase in fuel, so what? Your bill goes from $30 a month up 300%. Okay, it's $100 a month. Can people afford that? Some can, some can't. But it's not just that today apparently my driveway is a fucking freeway. It's not just the cost of a gallon of gas. It's the cost of everything else associated with the use of oil. And that turns into everything. The cost of your electricity is actually tied to oil. The cost of your food, clothes, entertainment, the cost of goods, plastics especially, are tied directly to oil. Entertainment, everything we do. If we see a 300%, if we see a 33% increase in the cost of energy, what do you think that's going to do to the cost of goods? Inflation is what I'm talking about. Inflation. Right now we're seeing an increase. It started. Finally it started. Increase in interest rates. What do you think that's going to do to disposable income levels? Well, that took care of that. Definitely a storm coming in. So we've seen inflation signs, they're up. Interest rates are up. And if we see an increase in energy costs, it's going up. There are unintended consequences for the lifestyles that we in America, it's coming. It's coming for us right now. We've seen peak oil. The production rate has come down. It's getting more expensive. There's more competition from other countries. Unintended consequences. Nobody, including me, I didn't see this peak oil thing 30 years ago. I didn't see it 20 years ago. Right? I just started hearing about it back when they first started talking about it, 10 years ago or so. Peak oil, maybe it was 15. But to think about the unintended consequences of building an entire industrial, economic, worldwide system on cheap oil. It's just like everything else. We have to pay for it eventually. And that's the interesting thing, is eventually you have to pay the piper. I don't know if they believed at some point that there was an endless supply of cheap, inexpensive, easy to get oil and that there would never be competition for it. Well, surprise, surprise, we're here today. It's not easy to find. We're running out of it. It's getting more expensive to produce. And the ratio, the amount of energy it takes just to get it. Oil is chewing up oil, in other words. It's taking a lot of oil just to get the oil. We've got a system right now where our lifestyles are in peril. But it's more than just that. Right? The world is in shit-it's-the-fan peril because of oil. Because of the unintended consequence. People 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago thought nothing of debt. Who cares? We'll pay it back later. Right? And so they've carried that not only from government, but into our personal lives. Most people are in debt. They have this much disposable income. Fuck it. Everything's fine. When you start seeing massive inflation, like we did in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, look out. How about 8% inflation a year? That means your income shrinks. Can you afford to lose 8% of your income this year? How about 10% next year and 12% the year after? What's that going to do to your disposable income? It's gone. It's gone. That's just inflation. How about an increase in the interest rates? We just topped 3%, and it's been holding above 3, and they're talking about 4, 5, and 6. How can you afford that financially? You can't. There is going to be a huge consequence for the irresponsibility of the American public and the American private, as well as the American corporate. And it's not just America, it's the whole fucking world. They're not going to be able to afford the interest. They're not going to be able to afford what inflation costs. They're not going to be able to afford the energy. If you can't afford those things, are you going to start buying new TVs? Are you going to go buy another car? How about getting your house painted and doing all that remodeling on your house? Fuck, you won't be able to afford your house hardly, much less improve it by buying new appliances. Those are called durable goods. They used to be made in America and part of our economy, but now we take all that money from every washer and dryer set, we throw it offshore, overseas. You want a new car? Well, you buy the car, the labor's paid for in America, but guess where the profits go? Poof, overseas to foreign or international corporations. You see, they don't pay taxes the way everyone else does. There's unintended consequences for all the mistakes that we've made as individuals, as a nation, as a world, collectively, across many generations. When you talk about empires and you talk about civilizations and you talk about them in the past tense, what does that mean? It means they came and then they perished, they died, they went away. You know, the greatest that we always talk about in the history books is the easiest one to point to, and that is the Roman Empire. But shortly before that, just a couple hundred years before that, was the Greek Empire. There's the Egyptian Empire, right? There were the great Khans hundreds of years later. You know, the Mongolian Empire. You had the Persian Empire. Where the fuck are they? There was the Indus Valley civilization that disappeared. One of the greatest civilizations ever, just disappeared off the face of the earth. How about the Mayans and Aztecs here in the Americas? Huge, immense. Right? They're still digging pyramids out of the jungle right now today. They're still finding new ones. It was vast, expansive, powerful, gone. Why? I'm not going to blame energy or oil, but it could have been. You know, it could have been their ability to get food. It could have been a number of things, but every time there's a civilization, a critical error in judgment is made, a misunderstanding of the laws of nature. Right? You can play that craps table. You can play red and black, buying back, doubling down, all these things, and making sure you stay alive on that table. But eventually, the house always wins. Eventually, nature always wins. And civilizations fall, either because of an error that was made or a destructive social system is implemented. For example, communism, right? Social engineering programs like feminism, terrible, painful, hurtful. And there is a consequence for every action. Consequence. And that's what I'm talking about with oil. It's an economic consequence, but it's also tied to our food, because food production, food growth or creation, food storage, it's all energy related, and energy equals oil. People don't know how to live without it. They've gone too many generations without having to work. And by work, I mean physically toil and labor to produce and just live, kind of like feeding that fucking horse. You imagine spending 3/4 of your year growing food just for the horse, so the horse can produce food for you? Right? Little teeny bit of disposable income, wealth that you save after an entire year. That's where people are at. And I think humanity has forgotten how fragile civilization is. It's absolutely fragile. People seem to think that, well, I have an electronic ignition system in my car. Well, I have a computerized control system for my house. Well, we got a supermarket if you want food. Do you think nature gives a fuck or a rat's piss about technology? In other words, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So we're getting into it right now. What is the weak link that's going to break? Is it going to be our energy supply, which we've talked about, oil? Right? Is it going to be our ability to resist disease because we've weakened immune systems and created superbugs by abusing antibiotics? That's possible. Is our political system going to cause shit to hit the fan? Because they have overspent and overtaxed and overgrown our ability to support it. In every instance, the human condition has been to overburden the system that supplies it to the point of breaking. That's what shit hitting the fan is. That is every civilization's consequence. It's not intended. No one starts a civilization and says, hey, let's push this fucking thing till it breaks. They think, hey, we've got a great idea. We're going to work hard and make this work. And it's going to last a long time. But there are unintended consequences, and they must be paid for. Our economic system is horrifyingly bad. We've shipped all our production, which is where profits come from. Production is profits. Shipped it overseas, gave it to international corporations, while we rack up massive debt with no real profit creation. There's no excess to pay the bill. There's no treasury full of gold. It's all gone. So, shit is hitting the fan. It's just right now you're not feeling it. But it's coming. It's coming. And when money gets tight, when oil gets tight, when people's standard of living gets tight, that is when we have the greatest threat of war. Because a country is going to have to lash out. It's going to have to go somewhere else to get what it needs. Or it perishes alone, the way Venezuela is right now. But as you know, Venezuela is talking to Russia. They're talking to China. They're trying to make deals. They're trying to grab on. Right? And that's creating tension and conflict. We have the potential for huge amounts of war. Shit hitting the fan. You have to be ready. And this isn't fear-mongering. You have to be ready. There is no excuse if you understand what is coming. The storm, it's coming. It's blowing in. And I got some wind. I got some thunder and lightning a few minutes ago. Those are beautifully timed hints, right? That's an indicator it's coming. I know in about 15, 20 minutes I'm going to be buried in rain. Just drenched. Right now it's sunny and warm. Holy shit. Right? What do you mean? I heard a little thunder. Don't worry about it. Big gusts of wind. Doesn't matter. You know. Flashes of lightning. Who cares? Everything's fine right now. If I were to just lay here like an idiot and continue drinking beer, I'd die of exposure tonight, right? Unintended consequence. In fact, a raindrop just flew by me. And one just hit me in the head. So I need to get out of here. I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you for supporting us at Patreon. Thank you for all that you do in the comments section and helping other people. Go to the preparedmind.club if you don't already go there on a daily or weekly basis. Check things out. See what's being discussed. Lots of great discussions over there. It's your guys' channel. You pay for it. So take advantage of all that's there. Chance favors the prepared mind. Is yours. And do you really have a grasp of the unintended consequences? Please think about it. Share your thoughts. And I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow. Until then, Semper Fi, Godspeed.